And now we saw, the first weeks after he was removed from power, that the military allowed 2 Iranian warships to traverse the Suez Canal and enter into the Mediterranean Sea for the first time. One of those ships was apparently transferring the weapons to Syria that Israel later intercepted on the high seas after they had been transferred to a Turkish ship, or a German ship that landed then from Latakia, went to Turkey to bring those weapons into Hamas's hands in Gaza. And so, this is the new Middle East that we're seeing now. This is the environment that we're seeing now. Then in Bahrain, you have a proxy war between the Saudis and the Iranians being fought out. In Yemen, you have a regime that has been banned, that has had a close relationship with Al-Qaeda, but also a competitive relationship with Al-Qaeda is about to be toppled, and any semi-sentient observer should observe the fact that if Saleh is gone, then Al-Qaeda will be empowered still more in that extremely important country. And in Jordan, the Hashemites are hanging by a thread. King Abdullah had to fire his government. He brought in a new government, which is much closer to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is why the first thing that his new justice minister did was he went in front of the television cameras and he said that he wanted to release from prison the Jordanian army sergeant who shot and murdered 7 Israeli girls on a field trip along the Jordanian-Israeli border in 1997. So this is what we're seeing now from Jordan. That is the power that is rising as a result of these populist movements to overthrow tyranny in the Arab world. Not Jeffersonian Democrats. They are populist forces that are far more aligned with Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas than the tyrannical anti-Israel terror-supporting governments that they're overthrowing. So, this is a pattern that we're seeing. And so, on the good hand, is that Iran is also very stressed. The regime there is under pressure from the people who are saying, how can we not overthrow our government after what happened to Mubarak in Egypt and in Syria? We see that the Syrian people are rising up against Assad. And if these 2 regimes, or even one of them, were to fall, that would be a major victory for the forces of good, even if the people who replaced them weren't that great, because there is no successor regime, even if it was Al-Qaeda in Syria, that could be worse than the regime is today. And the same is true, of course, in Iran. And in Iran, the opposition to the government is actually pro-Western and far more liberal and democratic than the opposition in any of the other countries are. So we would be looking at successor regimes that at a minimum would be weaker than the regimes that they're replacing and therefore less of a threat, but in all likelihood would probably be more sympathetically inclined towards Israel and towards the West. I think that in the end, the best case scenario that we can look for in Arab countries that are not Syria or Iran, which is not an Arab country, is a situation along the lines of what we have in Iraq today. In Iraq, we have a popularly elected government. The Iraqi people hate Israel. They did not sign a peace treaty with Israel as a result of the American-led invasion. To the contrary, they still maintain a fairly active, formal state of war with Israel, although because they're Democrats and because the government has to adhere to the will of the people, they just don't have time to invest in disliking Israel. So they leave Israel alone in Iraq, and I think that really is sort of the best case scenario that we can look to today as a result of the endemic hatred of Jews inside of the Arab world. On the other hand, once the Americans leave, and they're leaving now, Iraq can easily be transformed into Israel's worst nightmare, because right now the rising power in Iraq is Iran. As the Americans leave, Iran is filling the power vacuum that the Americans are leaving in their wake. And if Iraq becomes what the mullahs in Iran wanted to become, an Iranian satellite colony along the lines of Syria, then that will actually represent our worst nightmare of what happens under Arab democracy. And so that is the other possibility, and that's really the possibility throughout the Arab world of what this means. Now, what should Israel do given the state of affairs? Well, there are a couple of things that we have to bear in mind. One is that there is room for optimism in what is happening, and it's not optimism for something that is going to be on tomorrow's news. We're not going to get any immediate gratification out of what's happening in the Arab world. But I think, first of all, there are two really important things that we have to bear in mind about what's happening in the Arab world and how it impacts or plays off against Israel. And the first thing is that when we see all of this instability and revolution going on throughout the Arab world, it shows very clearly that our way, the Israeli way of democracy, free market capitalism, egalitarian society, is the right way. That our form of government, the way that we live our lives in freedom, is the right way. Nobody in Israel expects. Israel is the only country in the entire Middle East that is not in danger of being overthrown, that the regime is not in danger of being overthrown, because it isn't a regime, it is a government that more or less governs by consent of the government. No democracy is perfect, but Israel is a real democracy, and our way of life enables people to live out their dreams and be everything that they can be to a much larger degree than in any other society in our region, and I dare say almost any other society in the world. And so our country is stable politically internally as a consequence. We don't have people saying, let's overturn the government and bring in a populist thing. We have that. We voted for this government. This government represents the people of Israel, for better or for worse, and nobody expects to overthrow it in Kikar Zion or something like that. Another thing that we have to realize is that, no, the populist wave that is going through the Arab world, that is inducing a situation where you're going to have something that approaches government by the consent of the governed in the Arab world, is not going to bring us peace with our Arab neighbors anytime soon. But it is going to be the first, it is going to usher in a new stage, which is a prerequisite for any future peace. Because what we've seen with what's happening now with the prospects for continued peace with Egypt, and even for the nature of the peace that we enjoyed with Egypt for the past 30 years, is that you cannot make peace with tyrants. You can't. Because, again, he had to maintain his own people's hatred of Israel and Jews in order to justify his claim on power, and prove to his people that he was sufficiently hostile to Israel in order to justify continuing to control their lives. So he wasn't able to produce any real peace. And as for the formal peace that we've had with Egypt for 30 years, well, since Mubarak didn't represent anybody as a dictator, once he's gone, nobody is bound by his commitments. So his commitment to the peace treaty with Israel doesn't bind anybody anymore, because he wasn't anybody's real legitimate representative for at least the last 20 years of his rule. And so no peace that we make with a dictatorship is going to survive that dictator, and no peace that we make with a dictator is going to be a real peace, because the dictator is going to be able to educate his people to live at peace with us. However, now that we're seeing popular governments rising up in the Arab world, what we understand is that perhaps be generation, perhaps 2 generations, perhaps 3 generations, but if we have a multi-generation transformation of the Arab world from tyranny to democracy, then that is going to be, in the fullness of time, the only way that we will ever have a chance of having any lasting peace with our neighbors. It's only when the Arab people themselves determine their course in life, for better or for worse, that we'll have any chance of actually making peace with them, because there will be a decision that they make. They will need an external enemy after a fashion in order to justify their own existence as people. And it is at that time that they will recognize what an asset Israel is to their region and to their lives. And that is when we're going to have peace.